Welcome back, my friends, to the Motor Gutsy show that never ends. It's hello from him, and it's hello from Sasha the Guzzy Dog. Hey, Sasha, what are we going to talk about today? The perfect bike. You're right, we're going to talk about the perfect bike, and if we have one. Well, the two bikes we're going to compare today are 74 Motor Gutsy Eldorado that I rebuilt over the winter, and the bike that I bought in the autumn of 22, the Triumph Tiger 1200 GT Pro. That is the road biased version. Okay, so shall we start with this? What are its good points? What makes it a good touring bike? Well, shaft drive. The number one reason for choosing a bike like this, in my opinion, if you're going to do long distance on the road or on gravel, is the shaft drive. No chain maintenance. You've got shaft drive reliability, and it will do gravel, mud, it'll do anything as long as the seals are in position. Unlike chain, which will wear itself out on dusty gravel roads, and belts, which are very prone to damage from tiny rocks which get embedded in the pulleys. So, shaft it is. Both bikes have shaft. Good points about this bike. The best point is the engine. It is incredibly powerful, 148 horsepower. That's the most powerful bike I've ever owned. It's got 5 riding modes, including rain, which restricts it to 100 horsepower, which is about the same as my old V-Strom. And even in rain, you can scare yourself on this bike if you zap the throttle open. It's got a computer to control all the power through sport mode, road mode, off-road, and rain, which I mentioned before, and then a programmable rider mode, which gives you a road bias or an off-road bias, which involves how much the traction control cuts in. So we talked about the engine, we've talked about the drive. It's got a quick shifter on it, which, to be honest, I could take it or leave it. It doesn't really matter to me. Got Brembo brakes, which are exceptionally good. Can't be faulted. ABS front and back. Obviously, you can turn the back off in certain modes. It's got a highly complicated TFT screen here, which will take you a few days to get used to. When I picked it up, the dealer said, I could tell you what to do, but you'll forget. The best way is for you to work it out yourself. And he was absolutely right. The best thing you can do is dive in and try this, try that, see what happens. I find it very distracting on a ride if I want to see what my trip is, because it doesn't automatically show that. If I want to know the engine temperature, it doesn't automatically show that either. The display is very bright and clear, but there's just too much fiddling and farting going on, and you have to fiddle with these. And that's close to the turn signal, so you very often get the wrong one, which I don't really like. Problem with the engine is it vibrates. It's got that T-plane crank in it. I have no idea why Triumph did that. That seems counterintuitive to me. The previous bike had a very smooth engine. This T-plane is, I think it's a gimmick, to be honest. The different power pulses may help the bike off-road, but why make the GT Pro with that crank? Why not just make the GT Pro with a conventional evenly timed crank? It would be far better. The engine does vibrate, and I've fitted grip puppies on which help. Now, it's not bad vibration. It doesn't leave your hands tingling at the end of the day, or your feet, but you can feel it, and it is very annoying having paid all this money for top of the range bike to have to put up with vibration. It vibrates about the same as the Guzzy, which says a lot for the Guzzy and doesn't say much for the Triumph. Right, the centre stand is a bit of a pig. It's difficult to get it on, and that foot comes up here somewhere, so you've got to be pretty supple to get your foot on it to push it down, and old farts like me may find problems with that. And trying to get it onto the centre stand when it's loaded with luggage is bloody nigh impossible. Other problems with this bike is this handlebar on the centre stand is at tit height for me, and I'm not short, I'm sort of 5'10", 5'11", and the top of the fuel filler cap hits me in mid-chest, so it's pretty damn tall. Now this bike, and I've weighed it on the bathroom scales, weighs 595 pounds. I don't care what Triumph says. In its present state, with crash bars in the front, frames on the back, and an empty top box, which is not on it at the moment, but it's the Triumph Chivy 52 litre plastic top box. With that empty, 595 pounds. Now, with all your weight high up, you have to be pretty careful where you park this bike, and it has tipped over on me at almost standstill, which caught me by surprise. Because once you get moving, the bike is very well balanced and it feels very supple. I've ridden the 21-inch front wheel Tiger, and it was actually, I felt, more manoeuvrable at low speed than this one. I think it's because it's got a different rake angle there. So that felt better, but it's still top heavy. And this is a GT Pro. Now if you went to the Explorer with the big tank, I think this bloody thing would be, well, I just wouldn't have it. I just wouldn't deal with it myself. So all in all, we've got a very good bike. I don't know if I mentioned the service intervals on the engine are quite long, 16,000 kilometres between oil changes, but I never wait that long. I change it at 8. Also changed the oil in the rear end, because it only holds 200 cc's or thereabouts, and takes as long as it takes to drink a cup of tea to change the oil. It's not a problem. It's very, very easy, quicker than cleaning and oiling a chain, to be honest, and you only have to do it once a year or once every oil change, depending on your frequency. Services on this bike would be quite expensive when you get to the valve job. It's a $2,000 job in Canada. The parts to do that are about $180, and that's what I would do. I'd buy the parts and do the valve clearances myself. It's kind of complicated because all this crap's got to come off, and I would do it over the course of a weekend. Now the Guzzi I can do in 10 minutes. I can do the valves in 10 minutes at the side of the road with one Allen wrench and one spanner and a feeler gauge. No big deal. So anyway, if you want a high-tech bike, this is the way to go, I think. I don't think there's much difference between the quality bikes, you know, the Ducati Multistrada, the KTM, the BMW GS, and the Harley Pan American. They're all up there in price, they're all up there in power. It's a matter of personal choice which you prefer. But I've found the Triumph to be very good. The only thing that does scare me is the technology in it and what's going to happen in the future. I think it's a bike that you need to keep for a short period of time and then keep trading it in for a new one. I can't imagine having a 50-year-old one of these like the Guzzi and expecting it to be reliable. But by then, 50 years from now, I'll be dead, and there may be technology existing to keep these things going. Who knows? Or there may be no motorbikes at all. You just don't know what the future is going to bring these days. So anyway, we've talked about that. We've talked about the high tech. We've talked about the uncertainty surrounding it. We talked about how it does everything exceptionally well, apart from being top heavy and that kind of thing. Right, let's look at the Guzzi. Now, you should all be familiar with this Guzzi if you've watched my videos. It's the 1974 Motor Guzzi Eldorado 850. Now, this really was a labour of love for me. I wanted one of these for a long, long time, and they're quite hard to find here in British Columbia. So when this one came up, 14 hours drive away, I pulled the money out of the bank and went and got it. No messing. It was in worse condition than I thought, so I rebuilt it front to back. Every bearing was checked, replaced where necessary, every seal was done, brakes were completely renewed, all the electrics were gone through, a new wiring harness was devised for this, starter motor was rebuilt, dynamo generator was rebuilt, the engine was rebuilt, and I just got, a couple of weeks ago I got back from a nearly 2,700 mile trip, 4,200 kilometres on this old Grail with no serious problems at all, just a couple of minor things. Switches, gear linkage came loose, which just needed tightening up again. Spark plug cap kept falling off, tied it on with a piece of string. She's got a couple of oil leaks. There's an oil leak that comes and goes on the front of the engine. There were a couple of leaks on the gearbox. The one on the speedo drive cured itself. I put some ester base gear oil in there, which is supposed to swell the seals. Maybe that worked, maybe it didn't. It leaks through the clutch pushrod tube. I tried a different method of sealing that. I used O-rings instead of the wedge-shaped guzzy seals. They're supposed to be better. Well, obviously they don't work. That's no big deal. And that gearbox only uses about a teaspoonful of oil every other day. I've got a leak on the final drive, just there where that paper gasket is. Again, that's no big deal, and I think that's partially due to the rear end getting hot and it doesn't have a breather. Now, if I can put a breather on the rear end, on the rear axle housing, I think that will take care of that. Nothing mechanical, the engine does not use oil. So yeah, she is a really nice bike to ride. It feels very old school, the bike is low. The engine makes a lovely noise when you're riding along. And you feel like you're doing a cannonball run, if you're familiar with the cannonball run, but that's the kind of feeling you get. You get a very old school type riding experience on this bike, which I really like. It feels like a motorbike, feels like the bikes we used to ride in the 70s. It's all steel and aluminium. There's only one or two pieces of plastic on this bike, which is great. She's heavy. She weighs 10 pounds less than the big Tiger, because I weighed it. And that was with my empty Krieger panniers on and those two fuel cans, which contain 3 litres of gas between them. So the weight is approximately the same, but this feels so much lighter and so much more manoeuvrable. The low speed handling is far better than the big Tiger. You don't, well, with this bike, all you do is you crank up the preload on your rear shocks and it just handles really well. You know, it handles better than most old bikes I've ever ridden. There's no wallowing in corners. You agree, don't you, Sasha? Yeah, she agrees. So yeah, I was absolutely surprised and pleased with this old girl. You know, she did very, very well. Simplicity is the key with this bike, and I'm familiar with all parts of it because my background is farming and agricultural contracting and welding and what have you. And I'm a practical kind of person, and I've never relied on other people to get me out of trouble. And with this bike, with the tools that are in that box and the little bag of parts which contain points, coil, condenser, maybe even a spare U-joint, and one or two other bits and pieces, I could ride this around the world without any worries whatsoever. And I know that I would always be able to get it going, and if not, then in a third world country they would have things like cables and bits and pieces that would allow me to get myself going again. Now compare that with the technology on the other bike. If that thing conked out on the top of the Andes, what the hell would you do? Now, having said about the simplicity, about the weight, it is a heavy bike. It's much heavier than other bikes in this era. You know, compare it to a Triumph Bonneville Commando. she is quite a lump, but she always was, and she never was a sports bike, say like a Commando or a Honda 4. This was always a long distance touring bike, along the lines of the BMW R96, R69, sorry, S. A quality machine, if you like. I know people have criticised them for the electronics, but the electrics on these bikes were either Bosch or Moto Morelli, which I find to be okay. Probably the only problem was with the switchgear. So yeah, she's a beautiful bike and really nice to ride. Superb bike, love it. The problem with it though is it's slow. You can get up to 70 mile an hour pretty quick, but beyond that it's a bit of a struggle. Now that might be me, it might be the ammo carburetors. Maybe I haven't gone quite set up right. I improvised with the air cleaners a few times. I tried foam, and at the moment they've got 2 pairs of socks on them. One fine mesh sports sock on the inside, and another one is a woolly sock on the outside, both soaked in oil. Now that's probably not the best thing for this, but it worked. It got me on a trip and got me home. Now I do have the original air cleaner, and I've had a friend make a connector from the carburetor to the air cleaner because they're unobtainable right now. Remember, these carbs are 1 year only, so I'm going to experiment with that in the winter, and I'll show you what I did and whether it works or not. But she's getting, you know, low to mid 30 miles per imperial gallon on the highway at highway speeds, which is 60 to 70 miles an hour all day. And she will do that all day, but she does drink quite a bit. I did try some iridium plugs in it, and we've got better fuel consumption by at least 10 miles per gallon, but they burnt out pretty quick. So maybe we'll try a high output coil, I don't know. So the two problems are the lack of speed and the heavy fuel consumption. Now, for those people who say, oh, well, 70 miles is fast enough, oh, you don't need to go any faster. Well, actually you do. Traffic conditions around here are pretty competitive, especially up in the north. With the oil patch traffic, they don't hang about. And I've had a lot of close shaves where on the big Tiger, you can see what's going to happen and you just accelerate away from trouble. You get yourself out of the out of the trap that they've put you into. You know, big rigs pulling over on you, and they're overtaking you and they're only halfway past. Morons in pickup trucks and travel trailers, caravans doing U-turns in the road in front of you, and all kinds of BS. It's very nice to have 150 horsepower on tap so you can zap the throttle open and get yourself half a mile away from those morons, which you can't do on this bike. You've got to ride more defensively, and sometimes it does not work. So those are my two concerns. Now up north in the Yukon and what have you, where the traffic is less, I think this would be a nice bike to tour on, but there's a lot of gravel up there, so if you don't want to go on the gravel, then your choices of roads are limited. So I think she's going to be closer to home from now on, this bike, unless I can get a bit more speed and a bit more economy out of it. I've tried different grades of fuel in this. It doesn't seem to make any difference. She'll run on regular, which is 87 octane or AKI, and she runs okay on 94 octane. I don't know what that's AKI. I don't know what that is. 98 maybe. She runs equally well on both, which tells me that my calibration and my timing may not be right, although the timing is done according to the book. Right, so that's it. We talked about fuel. Now, what about fuel on the big bike? Well, the book states that you must run high octane fuel on this. You must run 91 octane or 91 AKI. Whereas if I go up in the Yukon, and I like to ride in the Yukon, the only fuel you can get is regular. And we know what happens with gas stations is the independent gas stations will buy the old fuel off the big name brands. So sometimes you get stuff that is well and truly down on its, let's say, flammability. It doesn't want to burn. And you do notice it occasionally. Now, I have run this bike on regular 87, but only for short periods, and then I filled up again with 94 as soon as I could. So that is a problem, and I do like to ride those roads up north, and I do want to do gravel up there. So, so this bike, it's not quite there. It's not the perfect bike for me. The little bike isn't the perfect bike because it's slow and it burns a lot of fuel. Although it's a charming bike to ride, absolutely charming. This one is very thrilling to ride, but you don't feel like you're on a bike. You feel you're in the cockpit of a jet fighter, whereas with a Guzzi you feel like you're in the cockpit of a Sopwith Camel, if you know what I mean. Flying by the seat of your pants. So I'm thinking that next year might see me on something different. Might see me saying goodbye to this bike and getting something a little lighter and something that will run on poor quality fuel. Something shaft drive if possible too. So what does that leave me? Well, two bikes I'm going to look really closely at are the Moto Guzzi V85 TT, which I've sat on one and it seems to fit me well. I've not ridden one. It is down on power. It's 80 horsepower or thereabouts, and I would like to see what that's like in the real world. And then the other bike is the new Stelvio, which has come out and has just become available in Canada. And I really would like to swing a leg across one of those and try it. Now that is an expensive bike, but not as expensive as these. But would I like to drop it on a gravel road? Well, possibly not. And so those are two contenders, and the third one is completely different, and that is the new Royal Enfield 452 Himalayan. And I've been watching a few reports on that, and I've watched them performing in northern India, and those are the kind of roads that you would find up in the Yukon. Actually, India's probably worse, but and they seem to cope exceptionally well. Now, whether they're telling us the whole true story or not, I don't know. But that bike is chain drive. But it's a 450. It produces 40 horsepower. So it's going to be pretty poor on the highway at speed, I think, although people say not. I'm not inclined to believe all that, but it would be a great bike for going north on, where the roads are relatively empty and there's few people. But again, it's electronic, so we'll have to think seriously about that. I'd like to swing a leg over one of those and try it too. So there we are. Have I found the perfect bike? No, I haven't. This may be the perfect bike for some. This would be for your gadget conscious guy who knows what to do, or your credit card maintenance guy who, when it breaks, if it breaks, sits in a motel room and waits to be rescued. Whereas my old Guzzi is for your basic nut and bolts man like me, your home mechanic, your self-reliant type person. Both lovely bikes, and neither one is perfect. So what more can I say? Except to say, take care of yourselves, look after one another, keep the rubber side down, keep the shiny side up, be it Triumph or be it Guzzi. And until next time, it's goodbye from him, and it's goodbye from Sasha the Guzzi dog. Say goodbye, Sasha. Goodbye, Sasha.